Hello, you might remember my Edwardian inspired gathered walking skirt. You also might remember that I used this 100% floral cotton to line the yoke. I thought this fabric was hideous but would make a lovely wearable mock-up for an 1890s blouse. I used Truly Victorian's TV494 1849 shirtwaist pattern. It has two blouse options. I chose the one with a yoke. I never cut the sleeves at the beginning in case I make major alterations to the armhole. First, I started gathering the curves of the yokes. Then I basted the whole blouse to take the fit. I soon realized that the yoke was going to be a nuisance again. Before tackling the yoke, I backstitched the side seams. This time I made 26 stitches per inch. I also renamed the stitch because I have a tendency to name things myself, so I call these tiny stitches pearls. I cut one of the seam allowances very short. I folded the long allowance over the short one. I ripped along the edge. I prefer felling seams because I can hide the ugly wrong side of the stitching. I decided the yoke needed to be broader in the shoulder. This meant that the armhole had to be altered too. I also raised the neck in the front and took a little away from it at the shoulder. So what I added to the shoulder line and the armhole, I took away at the neck. Then I decided to make my task easier by replacing the blue gathering thread with my white sewing thread. I sewed the straight seam of the yoke first. Then I tried to spread the gathers of the curve evenly. The two gathering lines were more or less parallel, but the bottom one was longer because there was a curve in the fabric. This made gathering difficult as I had to pull more on the bottom thread. I stitched on or just under the bottom gathering line as I managed. The instructions said you should clip the corner, which would allow you to sew the curved seams more easily. I found it wasn't necessary. I overcut the edge, but I wasn't happy to have such a seam. As you can see, the front center edges went straight. At this point I felt I wasn't going to make this blouse from a more proper fabric. I don't like too much trouble. I cut 3 strips for the front placket. I used the width of my ruler for the width of the strips. I made them less narrow but longer than the pattern. I drew a guiding line for stitching. To reduce thickness, I undid a few of the overcast stitches and cut the allowance short where the front facing would cover the seam. I stitched on the facing on both fronts right sides together. It didn't look good at all. I couldn't cut it straight because that would have resulted in a way too small neck opening. I don't usually do this, but here I needed to cut the allowance of the front facing short. I turned the facing to the wrong side and whipped along the edge. I did the same with both fronts. Then I folded the edges of the third strip. I placed it on the right hand side front. Creating such a thick multi-layer front placket seems crazy. I think the reason for this is that you want to hide the end of the seam of the yoke. I pasted on the strip. I could cheat a little and straighten the front edge a bit by placing the strip more outward where the edge broke. I top stitched along the long edges. I cut the collar pieces. The collar pattern was perfect, I didn't have to alter it at all. I stitched the fore collar and notched the seam allowance. I always cut the corners so that when I fold the seam allowance, the edges don't meet at all. Then I basted the fore collar on one of the stand collars. I placed the other stand collar piece on top and basted the whole sandwich before I stitched it. Actually, I did alter the collar, but only by manipulating the allowance a bit. I notched along the curve. I turned the thing to the right side. I have to tell you the truth, I tried and tried to make the shoulder seams better fit my shoulders, but I failed, so I just stitched them as they were. I quickly cut and basted the sleeve. It looked pretty on Louisa, but horrible on me. So I went back to the collar and sewed it on. Only now did I cut the front facing to shape. Something didn't feel right. I trimmed the allowance of the stand collar because the thickness of the seam didn't let the fore collar fall. I had never done that before. I trimmed the allowance of the ends of the stand collar very short. Everything I do depends on how the fabric I'm working with behaves. all problems were fixed. I folded the blouse of the inner stand collar and basted the edge. I whipped the edge. I bought some vintage mother of pearl buttons. Look at the care someone took to wrap them. I love mother of pearl buttons because they are so charmingly uneven. They aren't perfectly round and they vary in thickness. I chose these. I made the buttonholes. I absolutely dread cutting buttonholes into the garment, but I love stitching them so much. Something always goes wrong when I stitch the buttonholes. This time I ended up with different sized buttonholes, so measuring the place of the buttons wouldn't have helped. Instead, I marked the place of the buttons in this unprofessional but very practical way. I put the shirtwaist on to determine how much shorter I needed to cut the front before gathering it. I didn't want to end up with an Edwardian pouch. I could have made it even shorter. I gathered the front and the back. I didn't bother much and used the marks on the pattern. Later I found out I should have bothered. My advice is, take the time and effort to place the gathers where they need to be on your body. It's tiresome and boring, but gives you a pretty result. I cut 2 strips of random width for the waistband. I cut them a bit longer than necessary. I stitched on one of the waistbands. At first I wanted to make a peplum. The pattern was terrible, the peplum looked terrible on me and I didn't feel like drafting a pattern myself, so I decided to go peplumless. I don't like peplums anyway. I stitched on the other waistband strip as well. I might redo the gathers, so at this point I only basted the waistband into place. Later I will need to add 2 more buttons as well. Sleeve time. I looked so hideous with that huge sleeve that I decided to try a more moderate sleeve. I used a 2-piece Lego mutton sleeve pattern from the Truly Victorian TV 495 sleeve collection. Here you can compare the 2 sleeves. This is how much the original sleeve should have been altered. The new sleeve only needed minor alteration. If you want to use this pattern, be warned that it is too short. I added some length, but I still ended up with too short sleeves. With cuffs, they would be alright, but I didn't want cuffs. Luckily, there was a fold in the huge sleeve along the straight grain, so I could cut one of the new sleeves from that. I just could fit one upper sleeve in it. I had plenty more fabric, but I didn't want to waste it. I sewed the seams but left an opening at the elbow. I couldn't really determine where my elbow was. I will need to wear the shirtwaist a bit before I can tell for sure. Then I will probably undo some stitches and gather the longer edge to fit the other. I was going to fell the seams, but it would have taken too much time and I wanted to upload this video, so I temporarily basted the folded allowances. I gathered the curve of the sleeves. Setting in sleeves is challenging. Telling which is the left and which is the right sleeve is challenging. I placed the shirtwaist and the sleeve next to each other. This sleeve has two curved seams. The shortest seam comes to the front. I turned half of the shirtwaist to the inside. I turned the sleeve so now the poof was closer to the center front. You need to be careful because you don't match any sleeve seam to the side seam. You match the shorter sleeve seam to the front bottom corner of the armhole. It is upwards on the front armhole. There's a notch marking it on the shirtwaist pattern. I usually struggle more with setting in sleeves, so this pattern I think is very good, unlike the shirtwaist pattern. Spreading the gathers isn't easy and I definitely need to play with them a bit, however, the first attempt was good enough. I basted the sleeves into place. Before doing anything final, I will have to wear the blouse for a couple of days. It doesn't matter how carefully I fit the garment, some issues will only show with the wear. I still need to fold and stitch the wrists. I have to decide whether to redo the waist gatherings and need to tackle the elbow situation. I also need to stitch 2 more buttonholes. If you're wondering why I call this shirtwaist a mock-up, if it's almost fully stitched and fully hand-stitched, costing me many days of painful work. Firstly, I wanted to understand every step, every solution in making this blouse. I had to better understand these sleeves. Secondly, the fabric is ugly and it doesn't suit me at all, but I had to use it for something.